So I wanted to talk about my container surf shack, which was recently in Cabin Pawn Inside, which is pretty cool. This is a 20-foot container, which was on the other side of my property. I hired a big crane, moved it over here onto concrete pads. I have a deck off the front, and the deck dimensions match the internal dimensions of the container, so about 18 square meters of additional space on the deck. I think it probably cost me about $3,000 to $4,000 to do the conversion. It took me about a year, obviously not working full time, and I used recycled materials pretty much wherever possible. The interior has been lined with a 20mm polystyrene extrusion, extruded polystyrene, and I basically glued it straight onto the steel surface of the container, and then I've glued a 4mm hardwood ply over the top of it, and then I've hidden the joins. And in the ceiling I've got battens that run across and just standard fiberglass insulation. The other thing when working with shipping containers is that the floors of the containers are often impregnated with quite toxic substances, and obviously if you're going to think about living in a container, you need to deal with that. And the way that I dealt with it was to give it a really good clean vacuum, washed it, and then I let it dry and actually put down a 2-pack epoxy. And the point of the epoxy was really just to seal whatever's in there, because there's really not much you can do about it. You can't sand it. You could put another flooring over the top of it, which I did consider doing, but I thought just the black epoxy floor would look nice, and at some point I'd like to actually insulate it from. So the front deck was actually designed to be fully removable. So again, if I wanted to move this container, I could unbolt the front deck. Now, initially I had a dream that the front deck would be floating, that it would be a floating deck. So I've used the forklift points underneath the container, and I've run my steel beams through the forklift points and then run them out the side of the container, and I was hoping that I could build my deck on there and it would all be floating, and you could basically get a bunch of people to pull the deck out if you needed to move it. Now, unfortunately, I'm not an engineer and I didn't quite get my steel beams right, I-beams. I think I would have needed very large I-beams to support the weight of the deck. So there's also a cost thing there. I-beams of that size to support a floating deck would have been quite costly. So in the end, I've actually got the floating deck, but then I have basically steel stabilizing poles which are concreted into the ground, and that keeps the whole deck solid. Now, if you go jump on the corners of the deck, you will get a bit of flex in them, but since it's pretty much just me or one other person in the container, it's really not an issue. One of the difficulties as well with containers are their dimensions. So the dimensions of a container don't fit any standardized building material sizes, which means everything has to be custom done. So that can mean that you end up with a lot of wastage and things like that. Whereas if you were to design a space of similar size, you could design into standardized building measurements. That would mean that you would be able to absolutely minimize your wastage and maximize the efficiency of the actual building and the cost efficiency of the building. So I probably wouldn't do this again. If I wanted a small space around 18 to 20 square meters, I would probably just build out of standard stud walls and all that sort of stuff to construct a dwelling like this, rather than deal with a container and welding and steel and vapor barriers and all of that stuff.